So, I have good memories and warm feelings for all my high school teachers and colleagues. Whenever we
After we finished high school, a lot of my colleagues
could meet after the war, we did. We always stayed in contact. There is probably only one of us left today as I record. It came time to finish high school and receive the certificate of maturity, as I mentioned earlier. After we finished, many of my colleagues left Poland to study abroad because of the difficult situation and limited opportunities at home. We didn't meet again until after the Second World War, those of us lucky enough to have survived. When the war came, almost all who had studied abroad joined the armies and settled overseas after the war. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough funds, and my family wasn't able to help me study abroad either. So after finishing high school, I had to earn money to eventually apply to the University in Warsaw. I waited during that time working in a storage facility for a brewery. It was very inconvenient.
Storage place, of course, had to be kept at quite cold temperatures.
At the same time, I was tutoring the younger children of more affluent families, including the children of one of the industrialists in Radom. After 2 years, I had saved enough to pay the university fees and begin my studies. I was accepted at the University of Warsaw and started studying mathematics. I did not live in the dormitories and had no major food expenses because I stayed with my uncle in Warsaw for quite a long time. However, the mathematics studies felt unsatisfactory. The atmosphere at the university was disorganized, and the system required students to do everything by themselves. Lectures and seminars were rare. After 1 year, I changed my studies to agronomy. This was already 1937 to 1938 and 1938 to 1939. In the autumn of 1937, I met my future wife for the first time. She was still finishing high school but already showed signs of a strong personality. She was still very naive at that time and devoted herself especially to learning French at the Sorbonne Institute in Warsaw. She was an excellent student and sometimes skipped regular lectures to attend the institute, which complicated things when she needed to obtain her certificate of maturity. She finally received it at the end of 1938 or in 1939, just before the war started. The political situation was far from satisfactory. Instead of preparing for a possible German attack, the nationalistic wave led to quarrels with Lithuania and even calls for war with that country. The army was poorly organized. Instead of investing in modern armament such as tanks, Poland still relied on antiquated cavalry and foot soldiers with very poor equipment and ammunition. One of my cousins served in the cavalry and later fought the Germans when they invaded Poland. The cavalry was very brave, but they could do nothing against the German tanks that overwhelmed them. After I met my future wife, I became more and more involved with her. I visited her home almost every day, and eventually her family accepted me as a friend. In 1938, we both came to Radom, and I presented her to my family. We went on a pleasant excursion together, then returned to Radom and back to Warsaw. When I started studying agronomy in 1938, the restrictions were similar, but the program was more rigorous and fulfilling than mathematics had been. I completed the first year successfully. At the end of the academic year in May 1939, I had to leave my student index at the faculty so the grades could be entered. According to the rules, I would receive it back at the beginning of the next semester. I don't remember exactly where I spent the summer break, but I think I was partly in Warsaw and partly in Radom. I was in Radom when the war started on the 1st of September 1939. When the war began, I received a telegram from my fiancé asking me to return to Warsaw. I had to go there anyway, because, as a student, my place for military enlistment was in Warsaw. On the 2nd or 3rd of September, I left for Warsaw by train. When I arrived, my future wife was not at the family house. At her parents' request, she had gone to stay with her grandfather in Grudziądz for the duration of the war. I did not go back to Radom. Instead, I stayed with my uncle and at my fiancé's family house, moving between the two. Soon, the bombing started. I couldn't even apply to join the army because the Polish army disappeared very quickly. The calls from the mayor and the president of Warsaw were contradictory. One day, everyone was told to leave the city. The next day, to stay and prepare to defend it. The preparations proved futile. After just 7 days, the army had completely vanished. The government fled to Romania, and the citizens were left to fend for themselves. I went to see my future wife's family. We were bombed twice so severely that we had to leave the apartment and hide in the basement. Luckily, we were able to return to the apartment each time. It was on the 3rd floor, European counting, which is the 4th floor by American standards. Many times I had to go out for water and food, running across streets where corpses were lying. One time, after returning from such a trip to my uncle's house, I lay down on the sofa to rest. Luckily, I got up to get a drink of water in the kitchen. At that moment, a piece of shrapnel came through the window and hit exactly where I had been lying. It then continued into the kitchen and seriously wounded the maid. We took her to the hospital, but I don't know what happened to her afterward. Sometimes during the bombing, when the German army had already occupied almost half of Poland, the Russians invaded from the east and occupied the other part up to the Vistula River. Once again, Poland was divided between the Germans and the Russians. When the bombing finally stopped and the Germans entered Warsaw, I tried to get back to Radom. On the way, I stopped to see my aunt, who lived on Janiczna Street. There I met 2 cousins. One had just returned from the cavalry after fighting the Germans. He had been released because the army no longer existed and was also heading home. We also met another relative, a young uncle who was actually my father's half-brother from my grandfather's other wife. The 3 of us went on foot from Warsaw toward Radom. On the way, we stopped at the place where my fiancé was staying, almost halfway between Warsaw and Radom on the highway. After spending the night there, we continued and managed to cover 60 kilometers before nightfall. When we reached Radom, my family was still in reasonably good health and spirits, but the situation soon began to deteriorate. At the beginning, when only the regular German army was present, and not yet the SS, conditions were not so bad. Some soldiers, especially those from Austria, were quite friendly and even came to our house. The situation worsened later when the SS arrived, but by then I had already left Radom. We had to decide what to do. My family did not want to leave, but I started looking for ways to survive. I learned about an agreement between the Russians and the Germans that allowed people born in the eastern part of Poland, who were now on the German side, to return home. I asked my friends in Radom to help, and I went to the town hall, which was still run by a socialist administration, where they had opened a bureau for such cases. Although they knew I had been born on the other side, they issued certificates for me, my future wife, and my brother, allowing us to go east. First, I had to return to Warsaw. My mother came with us. When I told the family we were leaving for Lwów, which was occupied by the Russians and had become part of Ukraine, where I had university friends, my mother insisted that she would not let us go until we got married. So on the evening of the 10th of November, we were married in a very quiet, secret ceremony. The next morning we left for the train station and departed. I will continue the story shortly.